pleasure to be with you, and thank you, Pastor Kevin, for your invitation. And it's something interesting. I left my car in Wahroonga, came by train, and I walked down and I looked at people's faces, and I thought to myself as I was walking, I wonder what's the story. I wonder what's the story behind each face that I looked at. It will be interesting to know. We're living in interesting times, challenging times. The pictures that you saw from Syria are quite challenging. This year I spent some time in places like Portugal, attending a conference. And in Europe at the moment, every third young person or fourth young person is without work. Europe seems to be in a mess. We've got some interesting events happening in America at the moment. Who knows what life will challenge us with? And looking at everything that's happening around us, I'm always asking, what is the most important thing for us to know? What is the most important things for us to know? And this morning I want to share with you a presentation which challenged me personally. Remembering and reviving faith in Jesus. It's easy to forget. It's easy to forget. Usually I travel quite a bit, and when I come to Sydney, I leave my car at the airport. I fly wherever I have to go, then I come back. And I usually park my car in the same spot, that Emu car park. And one day when I came in, I parked my car. Unfortunately, my usual spot, or the area where I usually park was taken. And so I parked my car in another area. I was away for about 5 days. And when you come back, you think about a lot of things. I came back to the spot where I usually park my car, and guess what? The car was not there. And I panicked. I walked around. It took me about half an hour to realize that I parked the car in a different spot. It's not because I'm getting a bit old and my head is gray. It's not that, except sometimes you have so much on your mind that you tend to forget. And forgetting can be very, very embarrassing. Very embarrassing. But there's some other aspects to this whole concept of forgetting, and that is the importance of remembering. And I want to take you to a passage in the Bible which is quite interesting and share with you an amazing story. Because Christians at that time were waiting. But at that time, it was easy for them also to forget because of different pressures of life, because of different challenges. As they were waiting for the second coming of Jesus Christ, they suddenly realized that it was not happening. And with time, they just let it go. Things were challenging for them. People looked around and they said, okay, the God that you worship seems to be so far away. Look at our gods. We have the visible gods. And you? What are you worshiping? A God who seems to be somewhere out there in heaven? And things had changed. So please open your Bibles to the book of Hebrews, if you have them with you. And I want to read chapter 10 because this is the focus, this is the heart of the entire message in the book of Hebrews. It's an exciting book, but let me take you to the heart of it. Hebrews chapter 10, reading from verse 32. Remember those early days after you have received the light, when you stood your ground in a great contest, in the face of suffering. Sometimes you were publicly exposed to insult and persecution. At other times, you stood side by side with those who were so treated. You sympathized with those in prison and joyfully accepted the confiscation of your property because you knew that you yourself had a better and lasting possession. And then the writer seems to say to them, well, listen, there is something more that I need to tell you. Do not throw away your confidence. It will be richly rewarded. You need to persevere. So it seems to me that the writer is using this term, remember, because you have let go of something. Something has changed in your life. If you will reflect on the beginnings of your experience, there was something exciting about it. You withstood all the pressures of life, no matter how challenging they were. You stood your ground because you were hanging on to something which had a meaning in your life. And he said to them, remember, recall. But remembering can be quite challenging. There's another story in the Bible about Peter, an individual who was so sure of himself. He said to Jesus that one day, Jesus, I love you so much, no matter what, everyone may deny you, but I will stand up for it. I'm so sure about it. I'm so sure and positive about myself that I will not let it go. And Jesus said to him, hang on a minute, slow down a bit. And here's the scene. And I'm reading from the Message translation, which is quite interesting. Peter denies Jesus. Now, Peter got really nervous and he swore, I have never laid eyes on this man you're talking about. Just then the rooster crowed the second time. And Peter remembered because Jesus said to him, when you will hear that rooster, you will remember. Remembrance can be quite challenging. Peter remembered how Jesus has said, before a rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times. And that shattered him. He collapsed in dreams. There's another place in the Bible when Paul reflects on this idea of remembering. Every time, as he writes to Timothy, every time I say your name in prayer, which practically is all the time, I thank God for you. For the God I worship with my whole life in the tradition of my ancestor. I miss you a lot, especially when I remember. So remembering also brings positive memories, but sometimes it can bring challenging memories where you will discover yourself, your true self. And then he goes on to say that precious memory triggers another memory. Keep this in mind for a few moments, because I want to share with you later on part of the research which suggests to us that remembering and memory is something very vitally important in our Christian experience. And he said that precious memory triggers another memory, another positiveness, your honest faith. And what a rich faith it is handed down from your grandmother. So he recalls the family story and the faith of this young man. So both remembering can have quite negative and challenging sort of impact, but it can also revive good memories. You see, memory rekindles, revives. It sparks something. It is opposite to something that is quenched and extinguished. And those believers in the book of Hebrews who are waiting for the second coming of Jesus Christ let go of something. The pressures of ordinary life took over. And a meaningful relationship with Jesus in everyday life experience was not with them anymore. And so the writer is saying to them, remember what it was like in the very beginning. Remember the early days after you have received the light. So my question was, what was the writer referring to when he said, remember when you have first received the light? What was in his mind? It seems to me that he is referring to some kind of an experience, enlightenment, when they were exposed to that light. It had an impact on their lives. They could withstand anything that confronted them while they were waiting for the second coming of Jesus. It seems to me that that experience that he's referring to generates new life. It announces a new day. It opens our eyes to a new vision. Something that confronts you, that helps you to rediscover that there is a new meaning in life. May I suggest to you that it's possible that it challenges us to refocus on the process of God's involvement in human life. I wonder how serious we are about the experience of discerning God's presence in life. You see, we have knowledge about God. We discover things about God. But how convinced are we that God is intrinsically involved in our life, in our individual struggles and pressures that we confront? Do we have faith and trust and confidence in a personal God? Not a distant God, but God who is close to each one of us. Is that our experience? Because I'll share with you a challenge of my own life. I think I've mentioned it to you before, that one of the most challenging aspects in our life experience is the fact that sometimes we're not sure. We have knowledge of God, but the heart knowledge is not as convincing. We struggle. Can you recall the time of your personal encounter with God? And if you're here for the first time, if you've never experienced an encounter with God, let me ask you a question. What is your vision? What would you like to experience? What would it be like for you? What do you dream about? How would you like God to reveal himself to you? What do you need him for? But if you experience an encounter with God, something very specific, maybe a little thing, what did it mean for you? My father was in a retirement village. I was asked to bring him over closer to us, to our home. And he was in Brisbane at that time. I've made arrangements. I've booked the flight. And I've said to the guys at the retirement village in Brisbane, what do I need to bring with me now? Oh, nothing. He will have about sort of 2 cases and a couple of boxes. He wasn't well. Just bring a car, hire a car, bring a car, and everything will be okay. When I came to pick him up in the retirement village, I hired a car. I didn't make any other arrangements for anyone to help us. When I came to pick him up, there were about 4 cases, suitcases. There was about 5 boxes. My father was in the wheelchair, and I was on my own. I was beginning to panic. We've put him in the car, we've packed everything. I'm driving back to Brisbane Airport, and I'm praying. I'm saying, Lord, I can't handle that. It's too stressful. I came to Brisbane Airport, and they were sort of rebuilding this whole place, so I had to find a spot there. There was a big roundabout. I came in sort of to park the spot in the place where I was supposed to leave the car, and I missed it. So I went all around again. I went all around, came in the second time, I missed it. I went the third time, I missed it. And I'm saying, I'm getting silly, I'm losing it, I'm going bananas. I came the 4th time, I missed it. 5th time, I came in, I got it, I was so happy. I stopped the car, and as soon as I've opened the door, at that point of time, I hear someone screaming, John! I looked around, and guess who it was? It was the guy from Avis. I had only couple of minutes to talk to him while I was signing up the papers and say, I'm going to pick my father. I'll be back shortly. I don't need the car for long. I'll be back soon. My name is John, blah, blah, blah. You know the conversation. He remembered my name. As I came in, he was just walking out through the main door. And the first thing that he said to me, John, don't worry about anything. Leave your car in here. I will look after it. Go and get some help out there and make sure that you're okay with everything. Can you see what I'm trying to say? Was it a coincidence? Or was it God's presence guiding me gently? If I would have passed through that spot the first time, the second time, he wouldn't be there. And that's what I'm trying to say to you. Sometimes we look for God in big things. But is it possible that because we look for God in big things, we miss seeing Him in the ordinary things of life? Where we can have the little spots, little monuments of God's assurance in our life. Assurance that generates an inspirational sparkle in life. But it's so easy for us to let go. It's so easy for us to create out of God a philosophical idea rather than create a faith in a living God. In the Bible, we have many places. I'm just simply giving you a few spots to help you understand that really that light, when Jesus came, when He touched the dirt of human life, He became the light to all men. The writers knew what we have seen, what we have touched. This we declare to you. They were so sure that God was with them. In Him was life, and that life was the light of men. The presence of Jesus brought into people's life new perception of God. And with that, conviction of who they were. Yet to all who received Him, to those who believe in His name, He gave right to become the children of God. You see, each one of us, it doesn't matter what background you have. It doesn't matter from where you were born. We all have a value. We all have uniqueness given to us by God. This is the light that He brings to us. And often we lose that assurance as to the uniqueness that we have in God's presence. And so it's easy for us to let go of God. And the writer is saying to those guys back then, he says, yes, when you were exposed to light, you stood the ground. You could face all the sufferings, struggles, persecutions. You were not afraid to go and visit those who were in prison. You were committed. You were on fire while you were waiting. He said, in the past, under the cloud of trying circumstances, you were in relationship with something secure. You see? Do not throw away your confidence. It will be richly rewarded. And then he says to them in verse 34, you sympathize with those in prison and joyfully accepted the confiscation of your property because you knew that you yourself had a better and lasting possession. I don't think he is referring to the material goods in here. Because in this entire book, when he is virtually recalling that memory, he's encouraging them to remember their commitment to Jesus Christ. You were in relationship because you knew that you had something better and lasting in your hands, something that inspired your life. And this idea of better in the book of Hebrew is always virtually focusing on the ministry of Jesus, on the ongoing ministry of Jesus in heaven. Jesus is not far away. Jesus is alive. And He said to us, I will be always with you till the end of the life. As long as this earth will last, no matter what will happen around us, whether it's financial disaster, whether it's personal disaster, whether it's anything else, Jesus said, trust me, I will be with you. The idea of better in the book of Hebrews stands for something more useful, something more advantageous, something more excellent. And I wonder, sometimes we are so focused on materialism that we forget that there is something far more important that we need in this life. We have an example. Just over the past few days, people have lost everything. All the material things that they've had. You know, I like those pictures when people cuddle their little pets because they care about life. They care about each other. If there is anything more important, that is preservation of life. Jesus said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have light of life. But you know, this is not the end of the story in the book of Hebrews. Because I've given you a little snippet where we find the heart of that message. Because the writer is saying, remember. He's taking them to reality of the life that they've experienced. But then he's saying, hey, let me take you to the very beginning, because what happened in the past should be an ongoing experience in your daily life. And that idea of believing and having trust and confidence in the one who is alive needs to be an ongoing experience. So what is the point of everything that I'm saying? What is the writer trying to say to us? In recent research, Elizabeth Harris from the University of Warsaw wrote a paper about the importance of memory. And she states something like this. Listen carefully. Memory cannot be reduced only to set ideas about the past, because it is linked with action and thus orientation towards the future. Are you with me? The memory, remembering the positive things in life, somehow helps you virtually to move on. It motivates you. It empowers you to move on towards the future. Memory is not merely recollection of past events. Rather, it is a memory that determines the transmission of meanings which will be formative for the future, and in the process it enables reflexivity. Now, contemporary research suggests and comes in line with something what the book of Hebrews is saying. That remembering is vitally important, because remembering is not just recollection of the past so that we can have a story. Memory and reflexivity should motivate you to move on your life's journey towards the future. It ought to bring confidence into your life. Now, this is contemporary research. But let's see what the book of Hebrews does. And at this point, let me suggest to you that revival, friends, is awakening in the church and in the community of interests and methods relating to personal spirituality. It involves a recognition of our half-hearted condition, our lack of zeal, passion, and earnestness in the things of God. Why? Because often God became a philosophical idea that we argue about. We have lost often the living experience which should motivate us day by day as we meet together, as we share the stories, as we encourage each other. We have lost something, because sometimes we do not have a story. And there is a gap between life's journey and the view of Jesus Christ, who is in heaven at the moment. There's a gap. So how does the writer in the book of Hebrew, how does he break through this break of human misconceptions? He does something wonderful. Let me take you on a very short journey. It's very exciting. When I have discovered that, I've said to myself, well, the book of Hebrews, it's not about ideas. It's not a scriptive sort of concept of the God who is somewhere out there. It's a story about God who is with us. So in chapter 1, he takes them to the very beginning. He says, look, God communicates. In many and various ways, God spoke to our forefathers through the prophets at many and various times. The living God communicates. He wants us to know. But guess what happened? What he communicated prior to his first coming, people misunderstood badly, and they were not ready for his first coming. So God was forced to do something else. But in the last days, he has spoken to us through his Son. Because we have lost the picture of who God is, God was forced to come down and touch the dirt of humanity in order that he may help us to refocus. One Christian theologian, F.F. Bruce, makes an interesting point. Had God remained silent and shrouded in thick darkness, the plight of mankind would have been desperate indeed. We would have no hope. We would have no hope. But now he has spoken his revealing and redeeming and life-giving word. And in his light, we see light. Can you see the point? It came to a point where God was forced to do something so tremendous beyond our imagination, God becoming a human being. God taking upon himself our own flesh and blood to become close to us. In the Old Testament, we see a God who was different than all the other gods. God who spoke creatively, he created. God who relates to people, enters into relationship with people. God who communicates. He comes very close during his creative activity and he kisses the soil, the ground. He is so close to us. He gives a sparkle. His identity, our identity, are in his identity. That's how close we are to God. He breathed his breath and we became a living being. This is our value. He was the one who provided. He was the one who led the people into liberation. He was an active God. And what you will notice in the book of Hebrews, that we see the same God. God who through Jesus speaks creatively, verbally, and physically, because Jesus came to touch our life. So how does the writer in the book of Hebrew, how does he break through this gap that we experience? What does he explain to us about Jesus who is in heaven, but at the same Jesus who can be relevant to us in our life's journey? So first of all, he said to them, well, listen, what you need to remember that from the very beginning, God communicated. But in chapter 2, verse 14 and 15, open your Bibles to that spot. We need to read that. It's very fascinating and very interesting. He talks about the relevancy of Jesus Christ and what he means to us in our life's journey. Verse 14, since the children have flesh and blood, he too shared in our humanity, so that by his death he might destroy him who holds power over the death, that is the devil, and free those who all have their lives were held in slavery by the fear of death. The writer takes them beyond. He says, look, you can look beyond even the reality of death because you have a new hope. I don't know whether you have fears in your life, but I have some tremendous fears in my life. I'm petrified of dogs. I'm just scared. especially when I see a large dog, because of the bad experience that I had in the childhood. My wife was 7 months pregnant. We were walking in Melbourne on an esplanade, just casually walking. It was a beautiful sunny day. I was holding her hand. She's walking by my side, quite a big lady, 7 months pregnant. And suddenly in the distance, I saw these big Alsatians coming at us. And guess what happened? Immediately I saw a lion. Because I didn't share with her my fears. But I was frightened, I was scared. And I said to myself, what am I going to do now? I'm just petrified. This Alsatian is coming at us. She's 7 months pregnant, and I said, at least I have something virtually solid beside me. So I dug behind her. I held her in front of me, and I was virtually protecting myself with her body. She looked down at me, and she says, honey, what are you doing? And I looked up at her, and I said, honey, you are my tower of strength. Please protect me. It was a bit of a fun because the dog just came close to us. He nearly licked us to death. He was a friend. But can you see what I'm saying? We all have fears. There are many fears that you may have in your life. They may be personal. But Jesus seems to take us over the world of fear. And whatever you're experiencing, he's saying, hey, you can trust me. But not only that, Jesus destroyed the one who holds power over the death. We do not have to fear. We can look beyond, knowing that one day things will be altogether different. But let me give you another point, which is very, very interesting. You know that well-known psalm in Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. The key in there is, even though I walk through the valley of shadow and death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. We often talk about the extreme moments. If death comes, we do not have to fear. But let me suggest to you that in the Hebrew language, the valley of the shadow and death has another meaning. Because in Job 16:16, you will find that the writer is speaking about the tears that he sheds. The moments of confrontation where no one knows. You might be out there on your own, even during the night, and you're shedding your tears. This is your valley of shadow and death. This is your confrontational moment because you are in struggle. The darkness of eyelids, tired from weeping. Friends, if we are honest with each other, at certain point of time in our life's journey, we weep. Because we are hurting. This is life. We are hurting. But I would like to suggest to you that the picture that the writer presents to us is that no matter what, even if God does not answer your prayers, let me be quite clear on that. God does not answer all prayers. It's not because we are sinful, and I've got no explanation for that. It's just the fact of life. I've got many questions that I have to ask God in the future. Sometimes we have a very simplistic sort of view. I believe God can provide miracles, and I've experienced moments where people were healed miraculously. But I've been at bedsides, friends, where people were weeping. We were anointing them, and there was no answer for God, and I was angry with God. That's the reality of life. But if it wouldn't be for the hope that we have, life would be miserable. Because one day, friends, we are sure that things will be altogether different. So freedom from here. Then he takes them a step further. God provides a way. God provides a way out. 2:18. Because he himself suffered when he was tempted, he is able to help those who are being tempted. Friends, if you struggle in your life, reach out to God. He understands you. He understands the struggles and the pain of your life, the disappointments, even your lack of faith. He understands that. But he provides a way out. I'm sure if you search your own heart, you have many experiences where you could say, well, that's interesting. I've struggled. But in some way, things have opened up and I could see my way through that tunnel. God provides a way up. Jesus suffered when he was tempted. He's able to help those who are being tempted. He's able to come with aid. And we have many examples of it. But that's not the end of the story, because then he takes them up into that heavenly realm, and he said, because there is a link between heaven and earth, do not throw away your confidence in the living God. Hold firmly to the end your confidence. He is encouraging them. He's saying, look, God's promises can be trusted if you hold your faith firmly in Jesus. We have enough evidence, and this is the point that I want to make, friends. If things get tough, open this book and read this book. What concerns me in the day and age that we live in, that we've got books, we've got videotapes, we've got the CDs, we've got all sorts of information coming at us left and right, even if you open your computer. And we listen to all those voices, bar one. Often we do not know the Bible. And sometimes we become confused. If things get tough, he's saying, hey, God gave us enough evidence in this book that he can be trusted. You see, friends, when the time had fully come, God sent forth his Son. Jesus came according to the promise. And you know what? Jesus said, let not your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many mansions. I'm going to go away, but I will come back again. The promise that Jesus gave is not a matter for speculations, but it's a matter of our trust in a friend that never fails us. Friend who was ready to die for you. He gave you an evidence. He gave me an evidence that we can trust him. How much are you worth? How do you value yourself? Are you worth dying for? Because this is what you did for him. Are you worth dying for? He came to restore in you the confidence in your value. He gave his life for you. And then he takes them a step further. He says, look, he's also able to save and cleanse your conscience to serve the living God. What troubles me of late is that I'm hearing voices which suggest that we can save ourselves if we can become perfect and sinless. Then we will be good enough for God to accept us and save us. I did not hear such a theology in the Bible, because my perfection is in the life of Jesus. The closer that I come into his presence, the more sinful I see myself. But at the same time, in this process, I experience a reversal of human attitudes. So much so that Jesus is challenging me even to love my enemies. How do you do that? How do you do that? And so, whatever is troubling our conscience, he's saying, hey, I'm able to deal with that. I'm forgiving you. I'm clearing you. You're fine. Believe in me. Believe in my forgiveness. Salvation is an act of God. It's something that God has done for us, something that we cannot reap, we cannot save ourselves. God saves. And he is able to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. And then the last point, can you see the journey? Can you see the journey between heaven? Do not lose your confidence in what God's promised, because what God's promise relates to our journey. And then the last point that he's making in chapter 10 is very fascinating. Let me take you through it. Chapter 10, verse 19 to 22. 19 to 22. Therefore, brothers, since we have confidence to enter the most holy place by the blood of Jesus, this is where our hope is. By a new and living way opened for us through the curtain, that is his blood. And since we have a great priest over the house of God, let us draw near to God with sincere heart, in full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled to cleanse us from a guilty conscience, and having our bodies washed with pure blood, let us hold unswervingly the hope that we profess. For he who has promised is faithful. And let us consider how we may spur or encourage one another towards love and good deeds. Let us not give up meeting together, as some are in habit of doing, but let us encourage one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. And friends, I don't know how long it's going to take, but as I look at what scientists are discussing, as I read the research papers, as I look what's happening around me, the world is in a bad shape. The world is in a bad shape. We're reaching about 8 billion people at the moment, and we can sustain comfortably only about 10 billion people. Are we doubling our world population very quickly? I don't know where it's going to take us. In many other areas, we're experiencing challenges, environment, moral issues, and so on. And we need to ask serious questions. How is it? How is our faith in Jesus and in his promise? Because he will come. But his blood cleanses us. I would like to suggest to you in the conclusions that remembering and reviving simply means to focus on Jesus. That's what the Hebrew writer is saying. Focus on Jesus. The blood of Jesus, as I have made a statement, the blood of Jesus shapes a secure community, one that trusts God's promises and creates a secure and inviting environment, a community living in the hope of Christ's coming. Because our conscience is clear, this act creates a community which has something to offer to the world which is around us. World that lives in a state of hopelessness. So, focusing on Jesus provides a sense of security, assurance of salvation. It cleanses our conscience and inspires us to be committed to God's service, like those people were back then when they were enlightened. So do not throw away your confidence wherever you're at. Refocus on Jesus. And finally, a journey with Jesus involves a process of discovering not only what God is like, but how he relates to life's circumstances, the trying moments and ambiguous circumstances and people. We need to bring God into the reality of this life. Worthy, worthy is the Lamb. That will be the song in the future. Worthy, worthy is the Lamb. Imagine when in the future, people from all nations will gather around the throne of grace, God's presence, and they will raise their voices, saying, worthy, worthy is the Lamb. As you listen to the song now, I hope that it will inspire you. But as you listen, I encourage you to think seriously about your own experience, your own faith, no matter what happens in the week to come. No matter what challenges you face, focus on Jesus.